There was a time in my life where I would do 6 sets of 82 push-ups every day, which ended up being just shy of 500 push-ups a day. And that was pretty much my entire fitness routine. I didn't really plan out any pull-ups or squats or anything. It was just push-ups. And I did eventually change, of course, but it was an interesting time and I learned a few things that I want to share. So here are 5 things I learned doing just shy of 500 push-ups a day. With the 5th lesson being why and how I eventually changed, which ended up being a pretty important lesson in my life. So here we go. And the first thought that some people would have is, well, what about imbalance? Aren't you creating massive muscular imbalance by only training pushing? Well, not necessarily. And by the way, the reason I'm not going all the way down on these is to avoid hitting my mic. I know that won't fully pacify the internet, but that is why. And first of all, I didn't get into the push-ups thinking about a perfect routine. I just wanted to start moving, which I encourage people to start doing. I was like, well, I just want to start doing some push-ups and some exercise, and that was a very well-known exercise. And I mentioned this in previous videos, but I started doing push-ups during commercial breaks while watching TV. It started off being 25 push-ups with what I considered slow and good form at the time, and over time that number increased, and I also increased the number of sets, and it went from 4 sets of 25 to 6 sets of 82. The 82 is a weird thing, I'll explain it later. But regarding balance, I saw a discussion online which basically brought up the point that imagine you have a leg that is perfectly balanced, a beautiful leg, but then you also train some quads for a while, right? And you're like, well, now you don't train anything else. You only train the quads. And now the leg, by definition, is going to be less balanced because you've gotten stronger with your quads, but not necessarily with your hamstrings, or as I call them, the Hamptons. And the question asked, is the leg now stronger overall? You've gotten stronger in your ability to extend the knee, of course, but is now the knee or leg in general weaker because you've only strengthened extension and not flexion? And it's an interesting discussion that different fitness people will talk about, and you can look those up online if you want. But just for me, I didn't necessarily feel any issues. However, if I wanted to avoid some residual tension, what I might have done afterwards is do some stretches and different exercises to kind of shake off the residual tension, shake it off. And the second thought that some people might have is, well, what about overtraining? Aren't you not giving your body enough rest and also doing what some people consider to be an excessive amount of exercise? And for me, I didn't really feel any effects from that. I'm not saying you should do that. Your body can adapt, and I did increase my sets and reps over time as I became like, this one's getting a little bit easy. Why don't I bump it up a few more reps? So it was a gradual increase. By the way, the reason why, if you listen to stories of mine where I talk about this, where I add on like 63 or 72, is because sometimes doing the sets, I would lose count. And I'm like, well, I want to err on the side of doing more, so I would just do a few more in case I missed count. So I don't know. And I'll say this, that if you're doing push-ups and you love it, that's great. But after you get used to higher rep push-ups, I don't really feel that much effort from it. It's almost kind of like jogging, especially when you go up and you can rest for a moment. So I don't really feel like 82 was that much for me at the time. And I did take some breaks, not usually because I was too tired for exercise that day, but because there were other things going on in my life. If you try to commit to something every day, there's usually something that comes up every once in a while to knock it loose, a road trip or a flight or something, even to be like, I really didn't have a chance to do all the push-ups I wanted. I can try to squeeze in a few sets. And what my coach, one of my sports coaches ended up suggesting was, well, simply add the things you didn't do to the next day. So if I didn't do 500 push-ups one day, I would add on 500 push-ups to the next day. And I ended up having like this push-up debt that ended up being like tens of thousands of push-ups that I didn't do over time, which I'll talk about later. But that is also why I ended up doing over 1,000 push-ups on a few days here and there. Yes, I was a little bit extra sore the next day. By the way, most of you probably already know, but every video there's someone new watching this and I want to direct them. But on our website, there is a free fitness routine if you want to get started into fitness. That is what I eventually moved into. And also we spent a lot of time making a home fitness app called Hybridcalisthenics. And it's designed to help walk you through building up push-ups, pull-ups, and squats and beyond. And it works really well, especially if you don't want to spend time reading about the program and just want to go like, boom, here are the exercises, follow this, move on, here's when to rest. Great job, you're awesome. Check it out. By the way, while a lot of this stuff is anecdotal, of course, and I do have what I consider to be a much better routine nowadays, there were some insights. While I wasn't what I consider to be overtraining, I had kind of a daily barometer on my physical energy level beyond just how I feel, which is a little bit different for those of you into fitness. You know, you can feel good, but not necessarily hit your PR, your personal best, that day. And because I was doing sets to near failure, around that time, I would usually have a feeling like, so today I can do a little bit more. And it wasn't necessarily the rest and sleep I was getting. That wasn't optimal, but it was pretty much the same around then. For me, the most notable change that I share all the time is not necessarily just getting a poor night of sleep and doing poorly the next day, which does happen. It was actually just the food and how I was eating and living that seemed to have an effect on this. When I moved to California to go to school there for a little bit, I ate not as well. I wanted to try all these different foods or these restaurants. It was cool, but it was also kind of college living, which I had a good time, but in my experience was not the healthiest. And I noticed for a while, because I was doing my push-ups at the time, that I wasn't able to do quite as many regularly. I would have to do basically in-set rests, which I know some people say nowadays. It doesn't really count if you stop, but it was basically, I would get to 60 or so and be like, oof, let me take a quick break and then I'll finish the other 2. And I still counted that as 6 sets of 82, but I guess you could break it up. You could say there were more sets and there were some sets with fewer reps. But I was doing that and I was like, man, this has been happening for a couple of weeks now. Why is that? And in my mind at the time, I was like, well, I'm not eating quite as much of a balanced nutrition plan as I was before. I just didn't have any fruits and veggies, right? So that was, in my mind, I was like, that's the balance I need. So I went out and I got some fruits and veggies. It probably wasn't just the fruits and veggies, but I think it was that new focus I had on getting a little bit more sleep, living a little bit more healthily, and trying to get a little bit more of a balanced diet and not just a lot of like side snacks. Making that small little change did increase my average set max, and I went back up to 82 for a little bit. And before I get into why I eventually changed, I want to talk about why I didn't change for quite a while, something I kind of convinced myself into. And looking back, it was very silly, but at the time it was something I was dead set focused on. I was calculating how many push-ups I was doing a day, which is 492, but the reason I say 500, I joke about never trust an influencer. It wasn't actually 500 push-ups, it was 492. The reason I say 500 is because it really fluctuated day to day. Sometimes I would try to do those makeup sets and to pay off my push-up debt, so to speak. So it fluctuated. It was around 500 a day, and sometimes more, sometimes none, and sometimes less. But I calculated my numbers and I was like, oh, cool. In around 7 years, I will have done 1 million push-ups. And my friends were like, yeah, that's great, that's amazing, that's incredible. And so you got some positive reinforcement for that. And I was like, well, I don't want to, introduce, I was reading about progressive calisthenics, which is what we teach on this channel now. I was like, yeah, I could do harder variations, but then that would put me off track to where I won't be able to do my 1 million push-ups, right? And this is way before I had a YouTube channel. So there's no benefit to me doing this other than me being able to say I did 1 million push-ups. And that held my attention for a little bit. And eventually I wanted to change. And a few years prior to that moment, to kind of rewind a little bit, my friend had either given me or shown me a book on calisthenics. It was about bodyweight training, and it showed how to build up from things like wall push-ups to one-arm push-ups, build up to one-arm pull-ups and beyond. And I'm gonna sound kind of old to some of you, but things were different back then. It's I feel like there's just more access to how to build up to these things now, or at least maybe I'm just more aware of them now than there were back then. So this was new information. That's why I got a lot of people. The idea of building up, not through weight, but through harder variations, got a lot of people into calisthenics, and eventually me included. But it took me a few years. I was a late adopter on that because I was like, man, I want to do my 1 million push-ups, right? Because this is what I'm used to, and this is the goal I have. And it was really a few years later when I was spending time in Germany. I was studying in Germany for a semester, and they did not have, this is what drove me to it, they did not have the unlimited internet that many of us are used to nowadays. And they were kind of experimenting with unlimited. Now I feel like the default is unlimited. But they certainly didn't have that in Germany, at least on the plan that I was. And it cost quite a bit to browse social media and anything image or video heavy while I was eating or out and about, anywhere where I wasn't home. So I would read, and I downloaded that book, and I read the PDF while I was out in restaurants, while I was out waiting for a train or something. I would read, and it ended up being a very inspiring read. So just beyond just the progressions, the author was also very good at inspiring people. And the author would explain how to get from things like wall push-ups to one-arm push-ups. And it's funny because I don't think he was really intending to be encouraging, but it ended up being quite encouraging because he would respect things like, wow, you can do an incline push-up, that's awesome. And he was showing some very difficult exercises, some of which still haven't been shown on video, but he would also give respect to things like horizontal pull-ups, knee push-ups. And I learned to embrace some of that terminology and that kind of vibe when I showed my family and friends and my girlfriend at the time, wife now. I was like, hey, have you tried doing this? And a lot of it really appealed to them, right? Because we discovered, I'm sure some of you have family, this is one of the magical things about calisthenics, is there are some family, especially if you're into fitness, you want them to exercise. You want your family and friends to exercise, but you know, there's probably no way to get some people into the gym. And I don't mean that in a good or bad way, they just don't like the gym. They don't want to go, they don't like the atmosphere, they don't want to dress up for it, they don't want to do that. But you're like, hey, if you're looking for a way to get started, you can do some push-ups against the wall or on the table, right? And a lot of them are like, I'll do that. They might not do it right now, but they're like, cool, good to know. And now they'll have something to do. It's accessible to people. And the fitness routine we have on the website now is a modified version. It's my personalized version of that fitness routine, kind of. I do give credit to the people on the website. I have talked to a few of them. They seem pretty cool. But it took me a while to make that change from chasing this arbitrary goal of 1 million push-ups into actual progressive fitness work, which most fitness people will tell you that's probably gonna get you more overall. It took me a while. And this was progress I could have made at the time. And that was a very valuable lesson I learned because this is what I was used to. It felt weird going to something else. I'm like, what about this other thing that I'm giving up? And it was really me thinking like, who would know that I did 1 million push-ups if I didn't tell them? Right, and I wasn't even doing it for like other people. It was just like, who would know? It's not even like other humans, like plants wouldn't know, my dog wouldn't know, right? It's like the water wouldn't know. It's kind of just like this thing that goes into the air. It's kind of an arbitrary thing, and do I actually care about that? And the answer was really no, and I tried doing it. It was fewer sets and fewer reps than I was used to, right? It was like 2 or 3 sets to near failure. I was like, huh, well, what in the world? But I ended up being stronger, more muscular, more fit, and I can still do my higher rep push-ups. I don't practice them as often. So I got kind of the best of both worlds now from trying something new, but it felt different at first. I don't want to say uncomfortable. I kind of put it off because I didn't want to try something new. But sometimes trying something new can end up leading to good things. Thank you so much for listening. Have a beautiful day, my friends. New chapter of Traveling Merchant Chronicles, which I'll link right here. It's our webtoon. We appreciate you've checked it out.